It's time for our discussion. Is this the 9th bind up, Philip?
It is. It's the 9th bind up.
Yep. Okay, it's time for our discussion for the 9th bind up of Vagabond, volumes 24 to 25 through 27. Philip and I are both sick, so we might get a little bit loopy, but
but that's our excuse anyway, right?
That'll be the excuse. My messy bookshelf, it's because of sickness too. It's not because it's always like that. But anyway, this was a really intense one. This was a really action-packed one. We were just talking about, this is apparently a fan favorite bind up, which there is a lot of good stuff that happens here. We started off with the Denshichiro fight conclusion. Yeah. What did you think of that?
Wow. Well, there are some things that I really like about that. Mostly volume 25, I guess. That's the Denshichiro part. And I ended up liking Denshichiro a lot more than I thought I would.
Same. Upon his first introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so deep.
He is. He's not just a brute who is living under the shadow of his older brother. There's much more to him. I love the fact that, anyway, he did this before volume 25, but we get more of it here. Denshichiro has a wife. He has a son or a child. And we get glimpses of that relationship and how he is attached and how that is and according to his warrior macho view, at times of distraction, but really that's what he should be. Like, Denshichiro, you should love your family and be safe with them. What are you doing? He's following his honor and being true to his code, and he's just not really up for it at all. So I end up feeling so bad for this guy who's, there's a lot of that in here, which I like a lot. Sort of, we've been talking a lot about how cool it is that Musashi and Kojiro are following the way of the sword, and they're having these moments of oneness with the universe and all that. But we've also, I think, talked about the price and the violence. And I think that, anyway, is very subtly inserting this exploration into this as well. What is the cost here? And you see a person like Denshichiro who tries so hard to live up to all of this and really isn't cut out for it at all. And of course, we have the duel, which is tragic in so many ways. Just, I keep seeing that vision of him holding up the sword, right? After he's been essentially, he's lost one hand and he's been gutted, and he's still holding up the sword. And maybe one of his finest moments is when he sort of thanks Musashi. He says, this was an incredible honor to die by your hand. You've obviously progressed so much here in a year, and you're amazing. And I'm glad that I got to go out this way, you know?
Yeah. I feel like throughout a lot of his journey, throughout a lot of what we've seen from him, he has been trying to bat away the very morals that you and I would uphold, that you and I would elevate. He does not want to kill. He has a healthy fear for his life, and all these things that societal expectations are that these are weakness, but we would say this is strength, which we kind of do talk about that. We do address that a little bit in this bind up later on with the monk, with your guy. And with that too, even the way he fights, it's all about honor. It's not about self-elevation. Even when his dad shows up and spiritually, and tells him why he wasn't chosen to be the leader of the school, and he kind of has this revelation of, I've always used my father's name to try to intimidate and try to elevate myself. Now I'm just going to use his name to try to honor him. And really the way he went out, it was with respect for his father. It was respect for his family. It was respect for Musashi. It wasn't this like drive to be the strongest and the best. So his arc ended up really being very impactful in the story full of samurais who are having to learn the hard way how unfulfilling this life is. And he seems to have ingrained in him naturally this value for life that he eventually comes full circle and says, you know what? the way I've done things. I'm happy with where I've ended up.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about his wife and child, how they're going to be after that. But it's interesting. You brought up the father, the founder of the Yoshioka school,
Yeah.
and something that I think Inoue does very effectively in here. And it's a theme, just like and I keep having to go back to our first manga together, Vinland Saga, because there's a lot of father-son stuff and a lot of interesting exploration of how masculine ideals are passed on from father to son. And there's a positive side to that, of course, where there are virtues that are passed on, but there's also a negative side to that, I think, sort of the more toxic side, if you will, where you see poor Denshichiro trying to live up to these ideals. And from our perspective, granted, a very modern perspective, it's unhealthy and it leads to destruction and it leads to all this sorrow. But he does have that moment at the end where he's holding his hand up and seemingly he's also, I think, in that whole sequence goaded on to some degree by the members of the Yoshioka school. They're kind of like, yeah, you got this, you're dominating. And he was being pushed in a way by that, trying to live up to being their leader.
Sure. Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, they desperately wanted him to win because of the fate that it would cause to the school if he didn't. And that kind of like continues on to this honor that he displays, that he accepts the ending of the results of this fight, and he is satisfied with the way it's turned out, whereas they will not honor the results of the fight, and they're willing to fight dirty to cut Musashi down from behind if that's what it takes, because that honor doesn't seem to be in them, even though there's some likable characters within the school.
Absolutely. Yeah. Quite a few of them who I think they feel the tragicness of this whole situation.
Well, and the hopelessness.
And the hopelessness. I mean, they feel that they must fight for the honor of their school.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they realize that what they're doing is dishonorable. It's that what we were talking about earlier with Ueda.
With the gun.
With the gun and him trying to prevent the fight from happening in the first place in a dishonorable way in order to preserve the honor, ironically, of his school and his friend, and really more brother, I guess it turns out, because we learned out. Yeah. So that's a fascinating, very paradoxical and full of conflict, I think, exploration that we get in among them. We'll talk about Ueda later because his that really comes to I think a head in the third volumes that we're discussing today.
Mm-hmm. You did call him getting his arm cut off?
Yeah, so it was real, I guess. It was.
Yeah, it was a win for you.
Yeah. I mean, it was a 50-50 kind of thing, I think, there.
No, but you got it. Celebrate.
Yeah.
Rub my face in it.
I can't do that. I mean, it could have gone either way, I think, really. But yeah, no, he was doomed. And sometimes that's a great way to tell a story, is to show you right from the get-go, this character is doomed. I'm going to show you how he gets there. And there's a lot of tension in leading us back to, showing us the scene, the culmination first, and then showing us how we got there. And I think Inoue pulls it off really well. It's not the easiest thing to do. It really isn't. It's a bold move, but I like it.
I like it too. It made the fight feel satisfying on the reader's end as well, because it was like, we've come full circle. We've come back to that. So it was satisfying to read, even though obviously it was tragic, because we do care about Denshichiro very much.
Yeah, and there's this sense of doom hanging over the whole scene. And my God, what beautiful, beautiful illustrations we get along.
Yeah, we do.
They fight with the snow coming down and the temple, or the whatever it is, the school or temple in the background. There's some just people had said, our commenters have said before, wait till you get to the later volumes, because the illustrations get better and better. And I have to.
That's agree. Very true. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, they were solid from the start. They were very special from the start, but they've become something really incredible.
Yeah.
You can definitely see the improvement in, in his art. Matahachi.
Oh.
He appears, and guess what he does, Philip, when he sees Musashi on the street?
He runs.
He runs.
He runs. That's like his default reaction to just about everything now.
Oh, sweet Matahachi. I still choose to love you, but you do make it hard sometimes.
Hard is a good way to put it, I think. He's such a tragic figure, and you see his conflict when he meets with Musashi.
Yeah, when they get to
Peizo to him, and he loves his friend.
He does.
That's there, but he also hates him because he's become this great swordsman. Everything that Matahachi fantasizes about, wishes that he could be. And again, he's like Denshichiro. He's led to this awful place by the fact that he cannot possibly live up to this ideal that he thinks he's supposed to embrace. It's a shame there aren't more ways to be a man, in this society, more healthy ways that you can be a self-respecting man,
No, I do agree. That's a very good point. It is a shame that there's not that opportunity for men to be something. I mean, there are plenty of men like the sword sharpener who is clearly respected. Like, it's not that you have to be a samurai, but it is a very like a man's man kind of world at this point.
Yeah, warrior culture and all that.
Right. And even those that are just humble men that live at home, they seem to be the more poor side of things. Yeah. Matahachi. So when he throws Otsu in Musashi's face, and he sexualizes her and like tries to harm her honor with, making those implications. I mean, I don't buy it. Obviously, I think it was very much a ploy, but it worked. It really did get under Musashi's skin to the point that Musashi has grown so much as a character to where now he doesn't just take on any fight for the sake of fighting and accept I'm going to die in a fight at some point. So whenever it comes, it comes. Now he really values his life and he considers the fights that he takes before he takes them. And he's really learning a lot, but in this, I guess, desperate state that Matahachi has kind of thrust him into, he ends up challenging the 70 men and would have died there that day, I'm sure, if your boy didn't show up.
Yeah, the first time, I just feel so conflicted about Matahachi, and he does, and I think the way Musashi takes it is more or less he's sad that this has happened, and he's very upset, obviously, about how Matahachi threw Otsu in his face, and he was wrong, of course, but this all coming from Matahachi's insecurity.
Yeah.
And then Matahachi afterwards is, what have I done? I think I lost a friend, and maybe your only friend,
Yeah.
And there's something really sad and tragic about his loneliness to me that it's just when you spend your life pretending to be someone you're not, you don't know who you are. And so he ends up very lonely.
He has a lot of self-loathing.
Yes.
And can't really get himself. It seems like every decision he makes, whether it's not giving the certificate to Kojiro, or this that he does with Musashi, or the decisions he makes around his mother, every decision he makes, he seems to immediately have immense regret, but he still can't stop himself from making all the worst decisions in his life.
Yeah, and there are all these near misses with him, like his mother is around, and he's trying to avoid her, actually.
I don't blame him.
Avoidance, running away and avoidance. Those are his two main strategies.
Yeah. And you would think after losing his uncle, Gon, you would think that would kind of be the slap in the face that he needed, but even still, he really just continues to fall into drunkenness and into lies and wallowing and self-sabotage. He's just a mess.
Yeah, he's so deep into it. It's tough to crawl out without some kind of major event as a catalyst, I guess. So
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get that or not in his
I
case.
think we will.
Yeah.
I think we spent too much time fixating on him to be nothing but a tragedy. There has to be some sort of arc for him.
Yeah. I hope you're right. I really do. I'd like to see that.
I would too.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a little bit of freedom for our boy.
Yeah.
But anyway, the main event of this section is in the battle when Takezo does enter into this fight. Now, I loved the scene on the mountaintop where he takes a moment to say, you know what? I owe this last year of my life to them. So thank you. He takes a moment to thank them before he goes in to engage in this ridiculous battle.
Yeah. I know he initially tries to run away. And then there's that moment of, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to do it. And so he goes back down. And that turns out to be an unintentionally, I guess, a surprise tactic because he comes from a direction they're not expecting.
Right.
And of course, before that happens, as you said, there's the 7 of them looking for him, and he jumps out of the tree and he's like, okay, let's do it, and that's when Takuan shows up. And
you're right. We should talk about Takuan before we go into the battle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's the narrator, and or the creator, kind of coming in here, and I think giving us sort of a modern look in a way at what's going on, and giving us that assessment, and almost are you sure you want to do this moment? He's also in some ways like Musashi has these voices of these old men, these older mentor figures, all these voices. And I think he's another voice, a sort of a conscience, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah. And I like that he, much like, bringing it back to Vinland Saga, much like Thorkel kind of was, which Thorkel is a very different character. But, he could identify in Thorfinn, wow, you've changed a lot. You look a lot like your dad. Which Musashi doesn't want to look like his dad. But Takezo, someone who, not Takezo, Monk.
Takuan,
who's known him since he was Takezo and who strung him up and like, who basically, called him a monster and said, there's no hope for you. He didn't say that, but you know what I mean? He sees in him now, he's like, you know what? You've got some strength in you. Kindness, all the strongest people have kindness, and kind of like calling that out in him, the improvement and the growth and the character that he sees in him, which is so valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think he's the sort of the moral end of Musashi's journey.
Yeah.
And he's sort of calling him to a higher place.
Yeah.
Which I'm imagining eventually will result in him leaving behind all of this violence.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't see it the way we see it. To them, this is honorable, right? As long as you're pursuing this honorably, unlike the Yoshioka school, who are like, okay, we're gonna have to just get him from behind. We're gonna, whatever it takes, it's 70 against 1, that's not honorable. So I think that's it's again ironic too that they're trying to preserve the honor of their school, by dishonoring themselves.
I think there was even a line where they said, just don't tell anyone about what we're doing. Like they're aware.
Oh yeah.
But I think at this point, it's not really even about honor anymore. It's about revenge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like pretty primal. Yeah.
Yeah. You've destroyed our school by winning. By doing exactly what you did everything right, but how dare you? So, it's some of that brotherly protection and some of that just like, this is what I've dedicated my life to. What happens when it's over? What happens when I don't have it anymore?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really strong buildup, and it's really interesting to see characters who like Uan, is that his name?
Which one is it?
The brother, the non-brother brother.
Ueda.
Yeah. Ueda. Characters like Ueda, who like I definitely have a affection for him.
Oh yeah.
Even though like he brought the gun, he instructed everybody, get him from behind, all those things. This story does such a good job of having kind of both of those things where I can see the value in you, I can see the good in you, but it doesn't change all the bad as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. There's very skillful storytelling here where you're bringing all these paradoxes together. This whole fight happens beneath this tree, which is this giant tree that Musashi was perched in for a period. And
Yeah.
a tree, of course, being an obvious symbol of life and connection, and with its roots spreading out and all of that. And there's such beauty to the landscape, and then you have this horrible scene where these guts are flying and limbs are being chopped off, and there's this mass slaughter happening there, which is really, for me, the whole middle part of this bind up is a blur almost, because
it happens. I think he does a good job of writing it so that it reads as rapidly as it's supposed to feel.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like a dreamlike blur in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how you're meant to feel like Musashi feels during this whole thing, because he's doing a lot of huffing. He's exhausted. You can always tell when they're tired when they do huff, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. He even, at times, he's like, I already cut you down. Or they just keep coming. Like, it's never ending. Like, you can kind of feel that blur even in his internal dialogue. I do love, though, that they structured them. They planned everything out. They're like, he has to come from here, and we're gonna circle around Ueda so that he's the final boss, and like all these things. And then Takezo just kind of cuts through all of it and cuts down Ueda so early on in the battle. It's like, I love that subversion of expectations.
Which is key, of course, because by cutting down Ueda, he pretty much negates their strategy for a while there. He makes them unable to work together because they're leaderless.
Sure. Well, he even gives them a way out. He says, all right, I cut off your head. Would you like to go? And they're in such a state of desperation that they're like, what are we supposed to do? We have to finish this. This is what's in front of us.
Yeah, and you see various members of the 10 swordsmen of the Yoshioka school trying to step up. And every time they try a different strategy, it doesn't work out. And again, a lot of them are doing so in a way that feels like they're honorable individuals following this code, and yet the code has led them to a situation where they're acting dishonorably and they know it. So it's kind of a strange thing to watch this play out. But what a crazy thing, though. 1 against 70. I mean, the sheer scale of it just seems kind of like, I don't know if this is realistic at all, but I'm here for it,
That's the legend, legendary nature. Sorry, I didn't want to cough in your ear. That's the legend, like legends always are, right? He may be a true historical figure, but we'll never know how much has been embellished.
Yeah, well, I don't care how good you are. There's no one on earth who could ever fight 70 and survive on their own. But, it was presented in a way that had me invested in it. So, that's great.
Yeah. And it also kept reminding me of Kojiro, who had a similar situation. They never stopped coming. He was huffing. He was exhausted. He was injured. All those things as well. We got some philosophy in this as well, where the old men come out and they recognize how much he's grown. But then he starts thinking, and I think this is important to everything that's been built up to before here. He's thinking, okay, if I can just finish this, then I'll be released from it. Yeah. I don't remember what the exact quote was, but it was something along the lines of, I'll be able to get out of this senseless killing cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that expectation and excitement for the future kind of snapped him out of his zen that he was fighting to keep, that disconnect of ego, disconnect of self, disconnect of time, just like get in the flow state, just get in this moment by moment, not being in the defensive, not thinking too much. That disrupted that flow state. And that's when he ended up getting overpowered for a bit there.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And Inoue does a beautiful job of representing that flow state with the river several times.
Yeah, he does.
The river, and that's Musashi in the flow, in the zone. And there's that scene too. I find it very interesting what he does there with the dead animal that Musashi finds, and you see Musashi in the river. Yeah, it's caught in an eddy or something at the side of the river, and he pushes it back into the river in a moment of real compassion. There, he feels for this creature.
Mm-hmm.
And pushing it back into the flow is, I thought that was really cool. I'm not entirely sure how to interpret it, but
I was going to ask you how you interpret it because I didn't know either.
Well, obviously there's a lot in here about life and death, and that's key. I think that there's a recognition here that death is part of life, that it is part of this flow, that if this is where the flow leads you, and it will eventually, everybody ends up at one point or another confronting their mortality.
Right.
But having this creature, which is died, and he feels the tragedy of this individual creature and its individual demise. And yet it becomes one again with the flow of life. And that's very Buddhist, of course. Is the idea that yes, it has its individual nature, but it's also part of the whole. And Musashi obviously feels himself, okay, just as this little rodent creature is an individual, but is also part of the flow, I'm basically the same. I'm exactly that. And if I can be part of the flow, then I actually transcend this individual self.
Mm-hmm.
And he does so for most of the fight. But as you said, near the end, he sort of is pushed out of that and does recognizes it too to himself. He says, I was so clumsy there at the end. Well, at least I made it. And then he's attacked again.
Yeah. Well, he spends quite a bit of time during the fight. I really like the kind of juxtaposition between the two perspectives, because we have Musashi who's constantly fighting to stay in the flow and recognizing, okay, keep the ego out of it, lose yourself, lose time. Like he's constantly reminding himself to stay in the flow. And then we have the desperation from the other side of it, where they never enter that flow. They never get there. They're just desperate. They're just losing everything and have to do something.
Yep.
Which I think probably is why it was such a ridiculous, outlandish numbers game, is to kind of illustrate, if you come from a point of desperation and of dishonor and I'll do what it takes, and, just not really realizing the situation, realizing the stakes at hand here, versus someone who is in the zone and who kind of releases all that and enters into that flow state, then there's a significant difference of what you can accomplish between those two positions.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's being illustrated there. You even have some that in his dreamlike vision during the fight, he sees one who looks almost transparent, and he realizes, oh, you're not really here. You're not really invested in this. And that guy just, is in. I think with the problem for all these 70 members of the Yoshioka school is that they are invested in this in an egocentric way. Like it's about my honor. It's about the honor of my school. And they're not able to enter that flow, as you say.
I think a lot of them too are just following the leader. This is what we're supposed to do next. Okay, then this is what we do next. They haven't really. And I do really appreciate the moment where Musashi kind of reflects on the fact that some of these men have dreams. Some of these men have goals. Some of them don't. Some of them have no idea what they want with their life. But what I do know is that I've taken that from each and every one of them as I've killed them.
Yeah, he never would have thought about that when he was young.
No, never. That recognition of the value of the life that you're taking. Yeah, he never would have acknowledged that. He's never really put any thought into the life of his opponents before.
Yep. And we got that earlier with Denshichiro. Realizing, oh, he has a family. He has a story. He's a person, And I think it's a real evolution that we're seeing here with Musashi. And eventually I can't help but think that it's going to lead him to a place where he leaves behind the sword entirely. But
I think so too. I
think so. Interesting too that we get during all of this the contrast or the scenes with Kojiro, who is missing his buddy, his snowman buddy.
Asked about him daily.
Now I have a question for you. do you think that Kojiro is missing Musashi the way a friend would miss a friend? Or do you think he misses him because he realizes that Musashi is one of the few, maybe the only person he's ever met who could give him that,
The
who
thrill.
would be a worthy enough opponent to give him that experience of giving himself 100% in a fight with him? Like, is that why he's missing Musashi? Is he thinking, I need to fight this guy, eventually? Or is it, oh, I miss my buddy?
So to me, it's very much I miss my buddy.
Okay.
I think that they bonded as friends at the Snowman. And while they're both fighters and they're play fighting that in their minds turned into a true fight and all that kind of stuff, they understand each other on a level. But I think too, he just wants to play with his friend. Like, I think he just, you know what I mean? Like, I think he just really misses somebody who gets him. And even when Musashi was having that conversation with Matahachi, and Matahachi was like, "You'll never be Kojiro," and Musashi goes, "Oh yeah, I know him. He's really great. We've had some great conversations."
Yeah.
And Matahachi was like, "No, you haven't." And Musashi goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot he couldn't speak. Man, feels like we've had some talks.
Feels like we were talking." Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think there's a bond there. I think there's a friendship there.
Okay. Yeah. Clearly there's a bond. But I can't help but think that eventually, bond or no, they're going to fight each other. And will that be a fight? I doubt that there will be any animosity involved in it, but it'll be something like that maybe feels inevitable, or something where they're both going to be chasing after that bliss, that transcendence in the moment of giving their entire selves over and being in the flow. And that's something that no other fighter could produce that in the other, as much as Musashi and Kojiro could for each other. So I just have a feeling that, and I'm not relishing the idea, because I like both of them a lot, and I like the idea that they're buddies. I agree with you that there's genuine affection there. There's an understanding, and that's such a great moment too, when Musashi's like, I felt like I was talking with him, and they were communicating, just not with words.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I could be way off base here, because the way the story has led, it feels like we're leading to a fight 100%.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think that Kojiro seeks the thrill. I think that he just has a connection with the sword. And he was pushed into fighting competitively by Ito, but I don't think that he ever would have sought out being the immortal one or being the greatest or the best on his own. I think he just wanted to have that freedom of being able to learn to fight, or to use the sword. And Matahachi, I think, Musashi, I think, is well on his way. Even at the end of this battle, I think it was, he asked that same question again that he asked after his fight with the leader of the original leader of the school, the older brother, or the younger, the older brother.
So that you're talking about Sojiro.
Thanks, Sojiro. Yeah, he had that same kind of internal reflection at the end of this fight as he did at the end of his fight with Sojiro of, I won, right? Why doesn't this feel as good as it should?
Yeah.
And then in this fight, he was like, if I win this, if I do complete this, then I can get out of this cycle. Like, you know what I mean? He's finding that unfulfillment early of this samurai life, this life of glory and of elevation is unfulfilling. So I could be way off base here, because you're right that it is leading up to a fight between them. But I wonder maybe if they will come toe to toe and end up sparring as friends and walking away as friends, rather than neither one trying to elevate themselves anymore, neither one trying to be the best anymore. Just we love the sport of the blade, and now we'll walk on being comfortable with not needing Kind of like the older people in the series are, where they don't need to. Yeah, they'll fight without a weapon, and they're happy to just fight to disarm instead of to kill.
Yeah, maybe when they finally have their duel, they'll do it with back scratchers.
Yeah.
That would be cool. I'd be in for that.
That would be amazing. That would be so funny. But like, or practice swords. Yeah, they could fight with sticks. They could fight with practice swords, like whatever. Or they could fight with swords and just intentionally not aim to kill, just aim to spar.
But I think you're right, and you mentioned this earlier, and it's a really great insight on your part. There's a parallel here between what happened to Kojiro earlier when Ito pushed him into the situation where he was being attacked constantly. Of course, they were peasants trying to pillage and get what they could out of a horrible situation, whereas Musashi is being attacked by 70 samurai, supposedly. But it's a similar thing in that I think they both end with a sense of the horror of this kind of slaughter, where Kojiro, remember, when he's near the end of that, and he comes across the soldier refugees who were the survivors they were on the wrong side of the battle.
Right.
And they come across Kojiro, and he sees, oh no, I'm gonna have to do this again. And he's not feeling it. And he says the name of his father in that moment. He says, he can't say Jisai because he's deaf, but he says Iai, in that moment. And it's a moment of despair. It's a moment of why, of just feeling the suffering and the pain. And I feel like Musashi's had a similar revelation here in the course of this. So I think you're absolutely right. These are very much parallel, and maybe this experience will bring Musashi to a similar state. He was behind Kojiro.
Oh yeah.
But this might push him to a place where he's more on level terms in a way with Kojiro.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think both are on track, and this is narratively very clear, to realizing and accepting the unfulfillment that comes with this life of the samurai. But I think that this love for the sport of the sword is still honorable, and so they may just come to that point. But before we move on from this, we should probably talk about how Kojiro learned to write Musashi's name.
Yeah.
And wrote it in the snow and called out to him. And Musashi seemed to sense it. He seemed to feel that connection. And, at the end of the fight, say, where do I go from here? And then he felt his friend calling to him, and he's like, I go to my friend,
Yeah, that was so cool.
I loved that ending.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's one of those beautiful moments in here. It's amazing that a series with so much violence in it could have such moments of poignant beauty as well.
Oh yeah.
It's really
that's balanced very well in the series. The beauty and the suffering and the pain and hopelessness. But my favorite part of this entire bind up, we haven't even talked about, so I just want to briefly talk about it. My favorite thing that happened throughout this fight was the perspective shifting that Inoue did during the fight, where we zoomed in real close to just one man, and he said, I saved some mochi today. It was going to go in my soup later. And realizing I didn't even consider the possibility that I wouldn't walk away from this, and realizing I'm not walking away from this. That zoom in on the individual and on the fear of what he's facing. And then the zoom out of the villagers who are just living their day-to-day life, just normal stuff. And then cut back to the battle. Like that perspective of this epic battle that we're watching and how monumental it feels, but the rest of the world that we're connected to goes on, right?
Yeah, good call. The way within the battle, the perspective shifts reminded me a little bit like Abercrombie or something,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Really well done, but it also is juxtaposed with the day-to-day lives that we see going on, and people who may even be presumably connected to these samurai who are dying left and right, and you realize, okay, they're living their daily lives while this tragedy is unfolding, and it's going to have repercussions. It's going to affect these people that we're seeing living their lives. So it's really powerful. It's really good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was a great bind. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say then I don't know if we're ready to go there yet, but then Ueda's part at the end, I think we have to talk about that.
We have to talk about that. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot it. Yeah, Ueda's part. Wow, he's their brother, not brother.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
No wonder his loyalty is so strong.
Yeah, and of course you get the flashback where he's a boy who is censured and even banished for not giving his all, right? Mm-hmm. Not giving it everything because it's Denshichiro, and you see that affection there and that bond. Yeah. And Denshichiro is little, you know, he's shorter than his older brother Sejiro and Ueda, and so you see just how much, because he felt protective toward Denshichiro, Ueda did, all these years. There's that bond from their boyhood. He was willing to suffer the censure of the master of the school, and for the sake of his friend. And then, of course, he's taught that very awful. I mean, what a horrible way to teach a kid. You're banished because you weren't giving it everything there. I mean, that seems like,
yeah, it's like one mistake, you're out.
Pretty rough. And that's what I was talking about before, about how fathers can pass on their ideals for better or worse. And sometimes it's great because, you know, your son learns honor, your son can learn positive qualities. But also I feel like that's this scene from the boyhood is what set up this whole thing. It's what made Ueda act the way he did in this moment. Everything can be explained by that flashback.
Yeah.
And the way he was taught, you have to do this way. You have to put all yourself into it. It's all about the honor of the school.
Do whatever it takes.
Exactly. So
that's a great observation. To me, this flashback anchored him to them and helped me understand why his love for them and his loyalty to them was stronger than what's precedented. Yeah. But I didn't. That's a good point. That's why that moment is what makes him pull the gun and what makes him say, "Get him from behind," because whatever it takes, you give your all.
Yep. That was the legacy of, you know, the founder of the Yoshioka school. So. Yeah, and you see it play out in various ways. You saw Sejiro, who was disillusioned with it in so many ways and was trying in a way to run away from it by going to the pleasure houses. And you see Denshichiro failing to live up to it. And you see Ueda committing the tragedy of dishonor in order to preserve honor as a result of it. So it's all passed on, and the repercussions are all there. But it was tragic, really. I felt for Ueda, who was just trying his best to preserve this honor, and everything is just sort of he's losing it all. And there was that one moment near the end where he just about gets Musashi, and I feel conflicted because I like Musashi. I'm rooting for him.
Oh yeah, totally.
I'm also rooting for Ueda, and I want he has this one chance, and then he gets his leg, but he realizes, I think in his final moment, that he failed.
Yeah. I was not rooting for Ueda.
Yeah.
I have a lot of affection for him,
Yeah.
But Musashi is on track to really learn some valuable lessons and change as a person. And I think Ueda was not on track to change anything.
No, I think he was stuck. And he puts his all into it, though. I mean, half the side of his head is gone. I mean, there's just sheer determination that gets him even standing, let alone trying to attempt this final attack on. And again, dishonorable, because he's saying, hey, buddy, you get him from the front, I'll get him from behind, So that dedication, that is just, it's crazy.
Yeah, really, really lost the honor that Denshichiro kept till the end.
Yeah, Denshichiro, ironically, probably comes off the best in a way. Because Sejiro too, though, I guess he was trying to protect his little brother, or his big little brother.
That's true, because he did have those scars all over his body, signifying that he's been protecting him for a long time.
Yeah. But
really, Kojiro comes off the best always.
Yes, of course. I'll agree with that.
Yeah. It was a great bind up, though. Excellent 3 volumes.
I agree. I really am just totally in here for this series, and I'm excited to see what happens. I'm a little bit nervous too because I don't want Musashi and Kojiro.
Oh, I know. I think
that's
why I'm kind of like, maybe they'll walk away friends.
Yeah.
Maybe nobody has to die because it's.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes and how pulls it off. I think is going to be really interesting.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, this was a great discussion. This was these 3 volumes. Here I go again.
Yeah. No, in spite of the fact that both of us you're coughing and I'm keeping myself alive with my concoction here.
I hate it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but this was great. This really lifted my spirits. So
good. I'm glad. Talking about death and honor will lift your spirits.
Yes, nothing like violence to make you feel wonderful.
Exactly, to really make you feel alive. But no, this is a great bind up. It read so fast. It had so much exciting action as well as deep reflection. Inoue really balances things so well in these volumes.
Yep. That's why I'm loving the series so much. If it were just the action as admirable as it is and all of that, I wouldn't love the series the way I
Agreed.
am right now.
Agreed. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. We are doing these discussions every other week. So this week was on my channel. Next week will be on Philip's channel. So we're doing them every week. We're doing them every other channel.
Right. Yes.
You know the way. So the 10th bind up will be on Philip's channel next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So thank you again for joining me, Philip, and we will see you again next week.